Hi and welcome back. This session focuses on the trio in classical Greek drama, namely Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. As we all know, the most influential art form which was invented by the Greeks, or the greatest Greek contribution to the literary world, was tragedy and comedy. And it's believed that both tragedy and comedy originated in Athens around the late 6th century BC. In that city, both of these tragedies and comedies were produced as events in civic religious festivals. That is, tragedy at the festival of city Dionysia in the spring season, and the comedy at Linnae in winter season. Though we also find that tragedies were also produced at the winter festival. So eventually, these dramatic festivals, which were inspired by the Athenian model, began to be conducted all over ancient Greece. So, this session, we're going to see the trio in classical Greek drama, that is Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. The three of them, they were the most predominant playwrights of Greek drama, and the three of them were contemporaries as well. So, to begin with, we'd start with Aeschylus. He was born, roughly we could say that his lifespan is from 525 to 456 BC. He was also an Athenian playwright, and looking into his early life or his biographical details, we find that he fought at the Battle of Marathon and he also fought at the Battle of Salamis, which was there in 480 BC. The first tragedy of Aeschylus was produced in 499 BC. The first of his 13 victorious plays was produced in 484 BC, and his last production was the Oresteia in 458 BC. He passed away in Sicily. And in his epitaph, that self-composed epitaph, it ignores his numerous plays. It's estimated that as many as 90 plays have been written by him, but his epitaph, it only mentions that he had fought the Persians at Marathon. So that is what is mentioned in his epitaph. Nothing is mentioned about his plays. And both of his sons as well as his nephew, they went on to become playwrights themselves. The earliest tragedian whose work survives intact is Aeschylus. And he is composed between roughly, we could estimate that 70 to 90 tragedies, and he has won first prize for 13 times he has won first prize. So, at present, 7 of his tragedies have survived, and along with fragmentary forms of 4 others. Aeschylus is known as the father of tragedy. There is an interesting story about his early life which says that as a child he was sent to watch grapes ripen in the countryside. So, in this process of keeping watch over the grapes ripening in the countryside, he fell asleep. And when he fell asleep, it is believed that Dionysus appeared to him in a dream and commanded him to write tragedies. So all of a sudden, Aeschylus began a tragedy the next morning, and he was quite successful in it, and he became a very successful playwright. So in Aeschylus' plays, what he portrays is the terrible suffering that results from a human nature which is driven by human passions and appetites into arrogance and excess, or the so-called hubris, which is the tragic flaw of excessive pride, which brings about the downfall of the tragic hero and the retributive justice of the gods. So the tragic vision that we find in the plays of Aeschylus is that we live in a world that is defined by absolute limits. But sometimes we attempt to transcend these limits, and that's only at our peril. So, yet we find in the plays of Aeschylus that he also sees hope in the community and its political values, which can create a more stabler order and minimize the disorder that's created by the human passions. The Oresteia, that is the only surviving complete trilogy that we have from the Greek tragedy, in which Aeschylus he traces the development of Athenian democracy from the dark Mycenaean world of domestic violence, the betrayal, the blood guilt, the vengeance, all these things that go on in the household of King Agamemnon, to the sunlit world of democratic Athens, the democratic institutions in Athens, and here reason, language, and law. These three things, reason, language, and law, settle the conflict. And we have the appearance of snake-haired furies of blood and guilt have been subordinated to Athena. Athena, who's the goddess of wisdom, and the city Athens is named after Athena. So, as far as the innovations that Aeschylus has brought about in his plays, some of the notable ones are that he has incorporated more number of actors into his plays, and he has also tried to get the chorus directly involved in the storyline of the play, rather than just having the chorus exchanging dialogues. And in his plays, he addresses very complex, intricate religious problems. To mention a few of his famous plays, we have Agamemnon. In Agamemnon, he describes how the gods punish a family for a series of murders that has been committed. Another famous play is the Persians. In Persians, he describes the Athenian victory at Salamis. It's actually a celebration of that victory. And yet another famous play is Prometheus Bound. There he explores the myth of Prometheus. Prometheus, who's believed to be the world's first humanitarian. So the myth of Prometheus is discussed in detail. So that is the contribution, the innovation that Aeschylus has introduced to the classical Greek tragedy. Now coming on to the second or the next tragic poet whose work has survived is Sophocles. Sophocles was born in 496 BC, passing away in 406 BC. He was born in the village of Clonus. He is also from Athens, from the village of Clonus. And even though he was born in a rich family, he did not receive any formal, sophisticated education. So Sophocles, he was destined to become one of the great playwrights of his era because he was the son of a prosperous merchant. He enjoyed a very luxurious life, of course, and also the luxuries of a flourishing Greek empire. He was well versed in all the arts and music. By the age of 16, it said that he was already well known because he was so handsome. For his beauty and grace, he was praised, and he was chosen to lead a choir of boys at celebrations. So then he completed his studies 12 years later. And he also began to write plays, and he became a competitor at the festival of city Dionysia. City Dionysia is a festival which is held every year at the theatre of Dionysus. That is where the new plays are presented. And in his first competition, Sophocles, he took the first prize, actually surpassing Aeschylus himself. And more than 120 plays were to follow later on. He would then go on to win almost 18 first prizes, and following that, he would never fail to take at least second. So he became a very successful playwright, we should say. And Aeschylus was also the most prominent Greek playwright of the time. Sophocles, of course, he must have watched his plays. Sophocles was a man of a refined taste, and he had a great interest in music. He had great zest for music, and he entered into the world of art in 489 BC. In a naval battle which took place near the island of Salamis, they defeated the Persian army. And when they celebrated this victory, they celebrated with great revelry and dancing, and Sophocles was their war hero. And at that time, he was just 16 years of age. 10 years later, Sophocles became greater than his predecessor, that is, greater than Aeschylus. Like Aeschylus, Sophocles also very actively he participated in the political and civic life of Athens. He was treasurer and a general with Pericles, and after the historical disaster in Sicily in 413 BC, he is appointed as one of the 10 advisors to deal with the crisis. He was also a priest of the cult for the hero Helen, and after his death, he himself was worshipped as the hero Dexion. So, sort of a hero worship after his death. And in Greece, these dramatic performances were celebrated, as I've already told you, as a part of a religious festival which was annually conducted. And there was a custom that the best play would be awarded during the performance of the occasion. So Sophocles, he always won the first prize or the second prize for almost a continuous period of 40 years. He kept on winning prizes every year. And legends say that he has composed around 100 plays, but today only 7 of them remain in that preserved state. He must have written actually more than 120 plays, and he won about 20 first prizes. So 7 of his plays survive. Among them, the most famous among the Greek tragedies is Oedipus Rex. Sophocles won his first victory in 468. So we find that Sophocles competed against both Aeschylus and Euripides. It's mentioned that after the death of Euripides in 406, Sophocles he marked that occasion by dressing his chorus in mourning dress in order to show to express his condolences for Euripides, another great dramatist. And let's look at the major plays of Sophocles. Sophocles, he abandoned the trilogic form. So trilogic form is the same story, telling one story using 3 separate plays. So in his plays, and he packed the story into a shorter, a very concise form that allowed for greater dramatic possibilities. The most famous plays of Sophocles are those which deal with the 3 stages of the same story, that is the story of King Oedipus. We know King Oedipus who happened to marry his own mother, not knowing the truth. And Oedipus the King, that is generally considered to be his greatest work. It explores the depths of modern psychoanalysis as Oedipus unknowingly kills his own father and he marries his mother in an attempt to avoid a prophecy, but ultimately that prophecy is fulfilled. That is, his destiny is fulfilled even though he tries his best to avoid his destiny. So according to Aristotle, Oedipus Rex was the one which fulfills all the features of a good tragedy. And it is from this play, Oedipus Rex, that Aristotle has drawn his material for his Poetics. Another play, Oedipus of Colonus, was the perfect play of Sophocles which dealt with the last moments of Oedipus' life. And then we have Antigone. Antigone describes the tale of a passionate young woman who refuses to submit to earthly authority when it forbids a proper burial for her brother Polynices. So Antigone was one of the earliest plays written by Sophocles. So artistically speaking, it's not so great as the other 2 plays. Oedipus the King, it's also known by the Latin title Oedipus Rex. It's an Athenian tragedy by Sophocles. It was first performed in 429 BC. It was the second of Sophocles' 3 Theban plays to be produced, but it comes first in the internal chronology, followed by Oedipus at Colonus and then Antigone. So Oedipus Rex chronicles the story of Oedipus, who becomes the king of Thebes and was destined from birth to murder his father Laius and marry his mother Jocasta. The play is an example of a classic tragedy, noticeably containing an emphasis on how Oedipus's own faults contribute to the tragic hero's downfall or the predestined doom, as opposed to having a fate be the sole cause. And over the centuries, Oedipus Rex has come to be regarded by many as the Greek tragedy par excellence. Its theme is related to a representative feature of Sophocles' drama, which Aristotle called as anagnorisis or recognition. Or anagnorisis is a moment when the protagonist recognizes a moment of realization, when he realizes that he has misjudged or misunderstood reality, and now he has to pay for his mistake by suffering for it. So Sophocles acknowledges that despite our limitations, the need to search out the truth of the human condition, that is the driving force of human life. One admirable, even if it leads to disaster, that search for the truth. So that was the main emphasis of the play of Sophocles. So we've mentioned about Sophocles. Now moving on to the third person, the last tragedian whose work has survived is Euripides. From 480s to 407 or 406 BC. See the dates, we cannot be exactly sure about them. So there are certain variations. Euripides was the son of Nesacides, was destined from his birth to be a misunderstood poet. He presented his first group of tragedies at Dionysia in 455 BC, but he did not win his first victory until 441 BC. So it took a bit of a while for him to gain that popularity. So, as a matter of fact, he's won only 5 awards. The fifth one wasn't even awarded, it was just awarded posthumously. So, this lack of recognition that he got, of course, it seems a bit odd because when we consider that Euripides was quite a prolific writer, almost 92 plays he has written. When you compare the number of plays that Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides wrote, it's Euripides who has written the greatest number of plays, but the number of prizes he got was indeed less. The main reason for this is that Euripides was ignored by the judges of the Greek festival. The jury, they ignored him because Euripides, his plays did not cater to what the Athenian crowd, what the audience wanted to see or hear, because he did not approve of their superstitions, he refused to accept their moral hypocrisy, and most of his plays dealt with many personal issues. So they had a tendency to include common people, more than just presenting gods and goddesses. He wrote about 90 plays, and 19 of them have survived, and also many others in substantial fragmentary among 9 other plays have also survived. So Euripides won only about 4 victories, and after his death, a 5th victory. But later, we find that he became the most popular among the 5th century tragedians. Euripides, at present, he is thought of more as a realist playwright than Aeschylus or Sophocles. The way in which he explores the darker psychological complexities of characters who are troubled by their passions, drives, and desires, so that makes him much more accessible to us, the moderns. So he's particularly interested in characters like Phaedra from the Hippolytus or Medea from the play of that name, in the destructive effects of sexual passion or on the psyche. So his plays they describe in detail the ravages of war, such as the Trojan women and Hecuba, testify to the remarkable freedom that the dramatic artist enjoyed in ancient Athens. Because these plays of Euripides were produced during the Peloponnesian War with Sparta and were intended as pointed commentaries or even very sharp remarks on Athens' brutal behavior during that war. So, some of his most famous plays include Hippolytus and the Bacchae, where he explores the psyche of men attempting to deny a natural life force, such as sexuality or emotional release. Then another play is Medea. In that play, he takes a look at the frenzied journey, the frenzied jealousy of a woman. This woman who has lost her husband's interest. And Hecuba, he documents the cruelty of Greek warriors who enslaved the Trojan queen and sacrificed her daughter at the tomb of Aeschylus. His first play was produced in 455, that is 1 year after Aeschylus passed away. He won his first victory in 441 BC, and his last play was the Bacchae. It won a posthumous victory. So, as I've already mentioned, he was not as popular as Aeschylus or Sophocles. The number of first prizes that he has won is quite less. And we find that in the later course of his life, he left Athens and he migrated to Macedon, where he wrote a play about the ancestor of the king of Macedon, and then he eventually passed away. We do not have much evidence that is left about his life, or all these are based on several conjunctures that we had to make from lots of other sources. So, of course, he had to migrate because of that bitterness that he must have felt when his plays suffered that sort of failure in that competition. So, at any rate, we could say that Euripides became popular, but he was popular outside Athens. It said that the Athenians who escaped the disaster at Syracuse were allowed to live if they could recite from the tragedies of Euripides. So, it became even a test of life for them. So, that was about Euripides. So, the three of them, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, they constitute the trio, the best known Athenian tragic poets or dramatists. So that is what we've seen in this presentation. Hope it's useful. Thank you.